I'd like to call this meeting of the Board of Education to order. Happy New Year, everybody. Good to see everyone. I would like to just quickly thank Ms. Strand's students at Squadron Line for the lovely notes we all have in our folders. If you haven't looked, please do so. We love getting notes from students, and that is a really nice treat for all of us to start the new year with. Is there any public audience tonight? Nothing. Moving on to committee report, BOE Communications. So Sharon, why don't we start with you?
I don't have anything.
All right then.
Happy New Year.
Happy New Year. Ryan.
Nothing to report right now.
Okay. Jeff? Lyd?
Communications Committee will meet next week, and we'll be meeting once a month. So we'll have more at the next meeting, Board of Ed meeting to relate. But also, just briefly, I just want to share my excitement with Commissioner Miguel Cardona. As you know, I'm on NSBA Board of Directors, and this is really a very pivotal time for Department of Education and for NSBA. And coming from Connecticut, over Christmas, over the holiday, we had a lot of back and forth and communication between CAVE and ed leaders here in Connecticut with DC. So they're very excited. We're very excited sitting at NSBA and having someone from Connecticut, but also having a commissioner rise to Secretary of Education to work with us in NSBA, as we represent 90,000 school board members across the country. So this is going to be an exciting time as he gets nominated and starts his journey. So on that, with NSBA, I just would like to put in another plug. We are having our equity symposium. This will be the fourth symposium that we are going to be holding. And I've spoken about this over the years. This year, of course, it will be virtual. And we have about 700, 800 educational leaders, board members, what have you, signed up for it already. So I'm sharing this information. It's on NSBA website. I can send it to you, but if you're interested, I think this would be really something, because it'll be a half day. It's going to be online. It's different than the whole day symposium. But in NSBA, we started the initiative of dismantling institutional racism in education, and I'm on that committee, and there are other sessions that we're going to be talking about this. So I highly encourage you to join, even if you can't join for the whole half a day, at least a portion of it or so, just to get an understanding of what we do at the national level. The date is February 10th. So that, and it's complimentary. There's no fee for this one, so it's really something to take part of. So I am encouraging everyone. And briefly, as you know, on the state level, the legislature convened last week, and the Ed Committee had their meeting yesterday. Doug McCrory is chair again of the committee, and they talked about the priorities of equity, combating equity, SEL, and increasing the teacher diversity. So that, more to come on that. And of course, at the state level, between CREC and CAVE, we work really hard with them. The situation this year is we won't be on the Hill due to COVID, but we will be doing our advocacy platform and agenda and talking to legislators about this. So, and one more date, the legislative breakfast, CREC CAVE legislative breakfast will be February 11th at 8 a.m., and that's virtual. So I encourage you also to sign up for that, so that we have an opportunity to speak to our legislators and from the Hartford area and discuss what's going on. So that's the communication for me.
Great, thank you.
Great.
Kara.
I would like to, it's a community point that in Simsbury High School, the students have been on this Martin Luther King committee for a decade. And we will be unveiling the Martin Luther King Memorial in Simsbury on Monday.
That's great.
That's fabulous.
It's
well done.
It's been a long time coming, and the students and the hard work that they put in on it has been just amazing, and we are so fortunate for the students we have in the school district and the teachers that support them, and Mr. Curtis, who supported these kids all 10 years, and Mr. Neil was principal when this all started years ago. So it's very exciting.
10 years ago that the video went to a national round.
Was it?
Yeah, the video went national. And it was, so it's a very exciting time. Unfortunately, due to COVID, we can't have people on site. So what we're going to do is it's going to be a birthday drive-by. So we're going to have a small program with the students and the press. Will be there to videotape it. We will be videotaping it, and it will be live feed on the mlknct.org website. And while you're driving by, you can tune into we're sending people Firetown Road, down Plank Hill, and down Hot Meadow Street. Take a right on Hot Meadow, and that's from 2 to 4 on Monday. You can tune in to radio station 87.9, and there'll be programming for you to listen to that will give you information about the memorial and testimonials from the students. We've already done that. And we will have, obviously the video live. And then going forward, we hope to do a lot of programming and have relationships with the schools and the high school, and we are going to keep going. We've got the team, the kids are still going.
Neat idea with the drive-by, though.
I like that. That's great.
Cool.
Thank you. So I hope it makes people feel like they can be participatory, because it's hard. And then we'll have a big party when we can have a big party, and we'll really celebrate it and dedicate it properly. But for now, this is what we got.
That's great. Were you able to reach back to some of the original kids?
We have some of the students.
I was thinking that.
We have some of the students. We have actually, one family, 3 students will all be there pulling it down, and we've got more of the more recent students are around. So I've got 3 kids that were in it. So it'll be really fun. I do have some of the old students that will be there, and hopefully it'll be fun. We've got to be careful, and I just
Sure.
feel bad for people who want to be on site and can't be. It makes me very sad, but
Right.
I think that this will be the best we can do, and I think we'll still be able to celebrate. And I think it's quite beautiful and honestly terribly moving when you walk the path and stand there and see there are 5 panels of glass and the kids were very, very serious and very thoughtful when they were designing the memorial, because they worked with the memorial designer, and everything has a meaning, everything has a symbolism, everything is a message that they wanted to bring out of the documentary. And so it's really, it's special.
That's great.
Everyone can walk through it on their own once it's unveiled. 6 feet apart.
There you go. Congratulations to you and that group. You guys have been great stewards of that project.
Kids are great.
Jen.
I'm all set.
All right, Mrs. Lemke.
3 quick things. The first is that I wanted to just remind the board, we've been partnering with Lynn Lyons, who is a nationally renowned expert on anxiety, specifically with adolescents. And you might remember that it was about 2 years ago that we actually had her here in district, and we packed, when we could do that, packed the Henry James cafeteria with hundreds of people to hear her speak. And one of the ways in which I've continued this professional development, specifically with our school psychologists and social workers, is to create these Zoom meetings with Lynn and with that group once a quarter. So that happened for the second time this year, this past Friday. And specifically, and you'll hear more about in this special education program review, more about mental health relative to the pandemic, but they were really able to bring cases directly to Lynn and help problem solve right in the moment while building their own capacity to address students' mental health issues. So thought that was really neat and wanted to share that with you. The second is, as a reminder, our administrators are all together reading this text, Unconscious Bias in Schools. You'll recall that one of our goals for this year is to develop our administrative capacity around issues of equity and unconscious bias. And this text has been phenomenal in helping us to do that. So last Wednesday, we had our second book talk, and we do that by utilizing a text-based protocol. And each administrator walked away with one leadership move they wanted to make over the course of the next month. And then this month and next, we'll be partnering with the Center for School Change to look at some specific data relative to our students' performance, relative to data around participation and access, and bringing that as well with Equity Council recommendations back here to the board in the coming months. So I just wanted you to be reminded of that. And the third piece is that this Friday we have an early release day for professional development purposes. Again, that will be Friday, January 15th, and 2 themes run across all 7 schools. equity and continuing their action plans relative to that work and social emotional learning for both adults and students. So certainly if anyone has specific questions about a particular school, I can follow up with you, but I wanted you to be aware of that as well. So that time is put to great use to continue the work that we've started and enacted even during the pandemic.
Great, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Are teachers that are working remotely, are they able to call into those, or is it all just one-on-one stuff?
They are, specifically at the secondary level, those professional developments are by and large done virtually, and Betsy Gonzalez, as the kind of principal of our distance learning at the elementary level, is planning specific PD for those staff members as well.
Amy. Mr. Sullivan.
Yeah, a few items. The most straightforward one is that our Board of Ed Policy Committee is going to meet Thursday morning virtually. What we most need to dig into is some pretty significant changes at the federal level to regulations having to do with Title IX. So that requires us to take a look at our sexual harassment policies. And I've fed some materials to the policy committee for their review, and then that'll eventually come before the full board in the spring. But pretty significant revision that has happened. And in addition, we did some administrative professional development, and it requires policy change as well. So that'll be coming to the full board after the policy committee can spend some time with it. Secondly, I did want to let you know that we are on track with our published timeline for the Tuten Hills principal search. We did a round of administrative screening interviews before the holiday break. We did a full round with the Tuten Hills stakeholders last week, and we have a finalist round tomorrow. Lydia represented the board at last week's interviews, and Tara will be representing you tomorrow. So it is a great process thus far with some candidates that we're moving forward with tomorrow who are more than ready to be the principal of Tuten Hills School. We have a good problem here to choose only one. We are prepared to bring you a finalist to the board 2 weeks from tonight. So we're excited about sticking to that timeline. And then the last topic I wanted to cover is I've had some questions about what's happening with our numbers in terms of students choosing remote learning during the course of the, increased cases, and what are we seeing in terms of trends. You'll recall that when we did the count of how many distance learners that we had on October 1st, that number was right around 400 at the elementary level. It dipped a little bit in October. We saw kids go back to in-person learning in October, and we did a count on election day of 376 students. And we did a count last Friday, and there are exactly 376 students, which is not to say there hasn't been some movement in and out, but we're not seeing any real trends at the elementary level in terms of the middle school has also been more stable. The place where we are seeing a little more choice of full distance learning is the high school. And in October, we had just short of 200 students who had chosen distance learning, and now that number has risen closer to about 275 students that have made that choice to do full distance. Obviously, the format may be affecting that, and that it is sort of built more that way at the high school, that you can join your classes virtually. So those are the trends we're seeing. With the high school, I think being the one that we want to keep an eye on, and we think we're appropriate with our hybrid model right now. We think it's the proper choice, and we just wanted to let you know that we continue to monitor the impact of who's choosing remote learning and who's not.
Right. And just to clarify, this isn't due to in-school transmissions. None of these rates were, just to reiterate once again.
Correct. Yeah, I'll talk about that.
Okay.
Am I up?
You're up, sir.
That was my last question.
So I have a couple other things, and then I'll get to that important point that we report out on weekly. But we had an interesting meeting this morning. Myself, Amy, Neil, Jeff from Tuten rejoined us, and we met with the State Office of Construction. And it was at Jeff's suggestion, in preparation for a potential grant application in June, if our project does go to referendum, to get them familiar with our long-term facilities planning. So it was a pretty rich dialogue. They had some great questions for us. So for us to see the workings of that office, I think was important. We're sending them a bunch of materials for review, but nonetheless, they are familiar now with the vision of where we want to go, and won't be surprised if we do indeed move this through referendum and have conversation about the best way to look at that Latimer project. And they had some interesting questions about the Henry James. So really beneficial meeting for us this morning.
Terrific.
Quick budget update. We are done with the individual meetings with principals and with program leaders. We have one more on the technology front tomorrow that Amy and I are going to do. So we're kind of in the process now of rolling up those numbers and really taking a look at them. Neil will be presenting to you really our first blush of the personnel budget at the next Board of Ed meeting. And as you know, organizationally, 80% of our budget is personnel and benefits. So that'll be a big part of our conversation moving forward. And it's an interesting budget development year, absent of the target that the Board of Finance gave us, because we budgeted for a year that we're now living in a very different experience from what we budgeted from, right? So it's actually thinking about what those needs are for next year in terms of supporting students, but going back to that baseline of where we budgeted coming into the school year in terms of being accurate with that. So just trying to think about some different ways to frame information to you so we can have good dialogue about the realization, for example, the realization that a lot of our intervention staff is teaching in distance learning. We need to pull them back into the fold next year for intervention, and we need to preserve those FTE. So while it might not be new cost, I think it's important to talk about transitionally in the budget in terms of this COVID experience. So 2 topics, I think, on the COVID front. First is vaccine distribution. I mean, it is at the forefront of everybody's mind, certainly organizationally, Neil's office, Sue's office, as we really kind of collaborate on these things, are receiving a lot of questions about what that 1B group will look like, what will be the model that the district has in collaboration maybe with anything else for distribution. So it's interesting, they continue to expand the group. So the group got expanded again today by the governor to include 65 and up. So the logistics of this group, I think we can all recognize, are going to be challenging because it's about 1.5 million people. So what they're saying is this 1B group is the largest representative group that we're going to see. So our educational staff is in that 1B group. They have not stratified that group yet beyond the first priority of 75 and up. So we're doing 2 things internally now so that we're at the ready that I just wanted to share tonight. And we're going to share with our faculty when we communicate this week. There is a management system. It's called VAMS, Vaccine Administration Management System. It's the state system that we can be prepared to start loading rosters into and signing up for. And the way that works is when people become eligible, all right, Tara would be eligible, say as a teacher, she would go in, see that she's eligible, and register at one of various locations around the state that may be convenient. So that's one avenue that will be accessible to our educators. We are also in communication with the Farmington Valley Health District to say, can we create closed clinics for the Farmington Valley towns, the 11 towns, and what would that look like? So we're exploring creating a database there and availability there. So the concern at this point from Jen Kurtanis, the director, is really it's a supply issue. I mean, we're being told that Connecticut's going to receive more supply because they've done an effective job with distribution. But in the numbers we're talking about, when you pull the educators across the 11 towns into the fold, you're going to be over 4,000 people. It's a significant push, and it could take several weeks before we even get there based on what we learn about other priority groups within. So we will continue to communicate that, because I can assure you our staff and faculty just wants to know everything that there is out there to know about it, because that obviously is a game changer in people's comfort level in doing what they're doing, and they've been great soldiers throughout in terms of working with and committing to our kids. So the other piece, Susan, you mentioned it just on the overall kind of positivity rates. So as predicted, the state has seen an increase in the data over the past 2 weeks. Farmington Valley has as well. We had our call this morning, and it was interesting to listen to the epidemiologist of the group kind of frame it a little bit. Not frame it as a super positive, but frame it as people need to recognize Farmington Valley is about half the rate of cases per 100,000 that the rest of the state is. So even though there are challenges with increased community spread, I'm not talking about schools now, I'm just talking about generalized community spread, we're in relatively good shape comparably. Within the schools, the most important data for us in the schools when we're making decisions are the case counts we get and the contacts we get from Farmington Valley or parents about positivity, right? And as I've said before, and I don't want to sound like a broken record, as long as we can contact trace with fidelity, we can communicate very actively, proactively with the Farmington Valley Health District, and we can staff our facilities. As long as we do not see person-to-person spread to an extent in our schools, we feel like our schools are a really safe place to be. They're a predictable environment. They remain predictable. You know, the spread in the community isn't due to an increase of the spread of the schools. So since we've started to see cases in that mid-November timeframe, we've had a couple weeks. We had after Thanksgiving where it bumped up a little bit. Last week and the week before bumped up a little bit. But we've been kind of around the average of what it's been. We haven't seen wild swings within cases amongst our staff and students. And I realize, you know, you hope that changes. We're off to a reasonable start again this week. And we'll continue to communicate. You know, I think that Friday communication, and I know we push a lot out to parents and staff, but we put those numbers out there. We're transparent with those numbers in terms of quarantine and number of cases, and we'll continue to do that.
And the dashboard on our website's a wonderful resource, so I always encourage people to use that as well.
And the reality of the break, we had that nice long holiday recess. The cases that, you know, occurred during that week didn't impact us from a contact tracing standpoint. So our quarantine numbers in the district right now are relatively low compared to several weeks ago because of that. So that's another factor.
Great.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, so now we are on to recommended actions. I need approval of the minutes of the December 8th, 2020 meeting.
So move.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? Changes? Anything? All in favor?
Aye.
Any abstentions? Any opposed? All set. All right, the approval of Simsbury's high graduation date.
That's over to me.
This is a nice thing to see so early in the year.
Well, here we go. Just to give you a little bit of context, back in July of 2019, a legislative act allowed districts to establish their graduation date firmly, and with the stipulation that it should be no earlier than the last day that was denoted on their school calendar of 180 days. Enter in this past July, about mid-July, there was the State Board of Education passed a resolution that permitted schools to have 177 days in their calendar. And the stipulation was those 3 days of 178, 9, and 180 were to be used in conjunction with reopening plans and preparation measures post-school closure and during the pandemic. And our calendar did just that, and in July, you approved a calendar that had the last school day denoted as Monday, June 7th of 2021. So because we are in line with the legislative act and that resolution, we are able to recommend a graduation date for your approval this evening to be set for Monday, June 7th of 2021, and there is a motion at the end of this exhibit.
So who would like to make a motion for graduation date?
I will do it.
Not that you're an interested party in any
I'm
way.
totally interested this year. Move that the Simsbury High School graduation date be established on June 7th, 2021.
Can I get a second, please? Second. All right. Any discussion? All those in favor?
Should we raise our hands because we're
Yes,
masked?
you're right, I meant to
Like,
say
do you
that.
even know?
Yeah, with our masks on, it's helpful if we just raise our hands and then we're all good. All right. Seeing everybody's hand, motion carries, thank you very much. And now we've got our, a donation to the music department.
That's also me. I don't know if it's fortunate or unfortunate, but you'll be hearing a lot from me this evening. So, in keeping with our policy, any gift or donation over the value of $1,500 has to be met with Board of Education approval. So tonight, the Simsbury Music Department would like your consideration for the acceptance of an upright piano that was donated by the Wilson family. And the pianos are actually rotated all along the district. This piano is slated to go to Terrafil. They are next in line. And so it will be used in conjunction with the music department for classrooms and also concerts. And the family, consisting of Perry, Lisa, Ian, Evan, and Harper Wilson, would love for their family piano to have a new home, and they just wanted to express their thanks at all the joy that the music concerts have brought to their lives over the years. So there is a motion to that end at the end of the exhibit.
That's very generous, and we appreciate that. Can I get a motion to approve?
I'll make a motion, the proposed gift of the upright piano to the Simsbury Music Department from the Wilson family be approved.
Second? Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
All right.
Jeff, second.
Thank you all very much. Motion carries.
He raised his hand, but I don't know if you can see it.
And now our 2021 meeting schedule.
So I can just share the one major change on that came out of some conversation from our workshop around the desire to get back into the school communities a little bit on alternate meetings. So this is a schedule that does reflect that.
Yep.
Meetings at 6:30, and at this time, we have our next meeting actually scheduled at Latimer. Another piece that we're going to do, that we've communicated with principals, when there is a meeting at your school, that the board would like a brief presentation on a program highlight, something special about the school, to give us a little bit more about the school community. I thought that was a great idea. So this schedule reflects those locations in the time at 6:30.
This is terrific because a lot of us haven't had a chance to be in a lot of these buildings, so it's always good for us to get back into these school buildings. And we encourage the community to come and visit us there as well. With that, can I get a motion for the meeting schedule as stated?
I'll take that. I'll move that the Board of Education set their 2021 meeting schedule as outlined in the January 12, 2021 board exhibit.
In a second?
One second.
And all those in favor?
Aye.
All right. Motion carries. Thank you very much. And now, Mrs. Lemke, I believe we're over you.
Back over to me. It is extremely hard for me to believe that this is my 6th year presenting a special services program update and budget preview. So by statute, special education services are supposed to provide an update to boards of ed relative to the annual performance report of the Bureau of Special Education. And what's become customary is for us to develop a more detailed synopsis for your review as a board. Certainly, I want to start off by thanking my special education department, the supervisors and leaders, our staff, our secretarial support, our custodians, which all play into this graphic of keeping the student in the middle of all that we do in special education, and of our mission statement, which is really about collaboration and community partnerships. And there exist no better partnerships in this district than around special education with our staff, with our students, and with our families to really get our students to a great place in their lives as they transition to post-secondary education, employment, and life. So every year we have a theme in special education. This is this year's: grit, grace, and gratitude. So again, just want to thank our staff and our community for their endless support, specifically through these pandemic days. No one could have imagined what we would be facing throughout the months of March to present. But I am so proud of how we have approached that and have kept kids in the center of it and during it all. So tonight, what I'm going to do is frame for the board a synopsis of our 5 priorities. They've been our 5 priorities for a while, and I wanted to share with you how these priorities are living during and throughout COVID. The achievement gap around reading and dyslexia, transition services, both between buildings and programs and services, but also the transition, as I shared, after students leave the Simsbury Public Schools. Want to talk a little bit about mental health and then just our overall service delivery. I also will share with you how did we do relative to our annual performance report of the state. Give you some updates around special education, our parent-teacher organization, and that collaboration. Talk a little bit more about equity, social-emotional learning, and then to give some highlights that will be forthcoming relative to our budget and how we apply our finances that we are given to do what's best for kids. So certainly if you have any questions during the program presentation, feel free to stop and ask. So first, our big 5, the achievement gap. And certainly this year, as you know, we did not have standardized testing measures of SBAC, of SAT. So usually in this part of the presentation, I would give you some comparison data. How did our students do, specifically those that have identified disabilities? How did they do in relation to their peers? How did we do in relation to other districts across the state of Connecticut? So I don't have those measures for you since we don't have that data yet. But I want to remind you that our data from 2019 and 2020 was very strong relative to our student performance. Our achievement gap here in Simsbury is still largely determined between special ed and their typical peers. That's where we see our achievement gap. When we compare our special ed student performance against special ed student performance of students in other districts, we continuously are high comparatively. But that doesn't mean we don't have work to do here in Simsbury. So in preparation for some standardized testing, which we do believe will be taking place this spring, we'll have some data markers in February to take a look at and to look at performance overall of our students. Certainly I will come back and share a little bit more with the board about that. But we will continue to be focusing on our IEP, our individualized education plans, goals and objectives, which really remain paramount in closing these gaps of achievement that we see individually and collectively for our students. The second priority is really around reading and dyslexia. So some of the committee work that had been going on is at a pause right now because our time has been focused on different issues, whether they be the achievement gap, mental health, pandemic mitigation strategies, yet our reading interventions still continue and continue strongly. One nice benefit of the pandemic and accessibility to professional development is that the state is providing specific professional development in reading and dyslexia at a lowered cost or for free. So professional development that used to cost a lot of money is now not costing as much money. The challenge there is trying to get a seat available at that professional development, but we are taking advantage of that and continuing to build our reading and dyslexia knowledge and capacity through those means. We've also made some shifts in our general education instruction. So Betsy Gonzalez has spoken before, specifically in the younger grades, putting a greater emphasis on phonics and decoding, and we truly believe that those general education curricular shifts are going to have long-term benefits also for our students who may be demonstrating difficulties in reading or reading disabilities. So I wanted to share that with you as well. In this shift of interventionists, we have an interventionist who is a reading expert, and she's also an expert in dyslexia. And she was working more in the Simsbury Reading Intervention Program, but due to this shift during the pandemic, she has been collaborating over and above with our special education staff to truly hone in on some individualized reading instruction for our students with the greatest needs there. So again, the work continues, looks a little bit differently during these times, but we're seeing great gains through that. Our third priority is relative to transition, and again, certainly the post-secondary or grade level transitions. The transition of the most major focus, of course, is transition back to school, since students had been home since Friday, March 13th. And certainly the emphasis that the mitigation strategies of mask wearing, of social distancing, of hand washing, those are our new transitional life skills for all students, but specifically our students with disabilities. I want to remind the board, during the summer, we were one of 3 districts in the entire state, out of almost 170, that actually offered extended school year services in person. And the ability to do that also offered us the opportunity to directly teach into those mitigation strategies and those skills, specifically for our students with disabilities who may have been struggling with that. And that really enabled us to have more effective and smoother transitions for all students. But that has been the most of our work. You know, certainly we are always looking at those gaps in skill, those gaps in transition, with the overall goal of how we best prepare our students for that next step, whatever that next step would be. One of the programmatic offerings that I always love to highlight is the Farmington Valley Transition Academy. So that's for our students who typically are about 18 years of age. Prior to this year, 21, I'll get to the fact that some legislative responses are now extending that age of majority to 22. I'll provide some more details in just a bit. But our Farmington Valley Transition Academy does an amazing job for our young adults with disabilities. And COVID actually offered an additional opportunity for us. You might recall that transition program was predominantly on the University of Hartford campus. And because we wanted to make sure that our mitigation strategies were in effect, and we wanted to socially distance, and we looked at our space and realized we actually need some more space. We're now partnering with Our Farm, which is the 4-H farm, and that is serving as a second site for our Farmington Transition Academy. It was a major ancillary benefit, but what it's also done, it's provided us on-site internships that wouldn't have been made available before. Whether it be at the University of Hartford campus or even in our own community, some of the person internships that we were doing are now not available, and understandably so. We can understand that businesses may be less likely to have students interning. But we've thought really creatively on how to do that. So whether they be internship sites within our buildings or at the university or at our farm, again, that transition work continues in a really relevant and wonderful way. The next component that I just want to touch base upon is our mental health. You know, right now, in this moment, we're not really sure of all the ramifications on our students and, quite honestly, our staff's mental health based upon the pandemic. So as you know, social emotional learning is one of the 4 basic tenets of our reopening plan. And the social emotional learning is not just focused on our students, but also focused on our adults. So whether it be continuing our work with national experts like Lynn Lyons, and I'll get to more developed plans that we've enacted with social emotional learning in Simsbury. That focus allows us the opportunity to renew, repair, and revive relationships that adults have with each other, and that adults have with kids, and that kids have with kids for that mental health purpose. Extremely important, continues to be a strength of our actions here in Simsbury, and I just want to highlight a little bit more about the social emotional learning. Again, the student and the staff are the areas of focus, and we have 2 full district teams, interdisciplinary in nature, that are coming together to help us plan and enact this work. So we have an elementary team and a secondary team. So we've set aside very specific time in all student schedules, grades K through 8, to directly teach into some of these social emotional learning skills. We have also provided that time set aside at the high school for this exact same purpose. This is important. So when I shared with you early on in communications that on Friday, one of the 2 major themes is around social emotional learning, it's to take the next step in some of these specific plans. So some might be self-care of the adults. Some might be, how are we framing some of these additional discussions with students? But just to give you an idea, social emotional learning is also wedded throughout our teacher growth plans. One example, every teacher, at Henry James, at the middle school, is taking a social emotional learning course offered by Yale. It's a part of their plan. So what they're unpacking this Friday is the next module in that, and always asking, what's the implications for us as adults? Because we want to do best by kids. So that's one example. We also have very specific goals at each level to focus on 3 components of social emotional learning for kids. How do you welcome kids warmly into your classroom every single day? What does that look like? What is that? How does that derive from your classroom culture? What engaging strategies do you use, specifically at the secondary level, where teachers are balancing both in-person learning as well as students that are participating through the distance option? And how do we end every single class, every single day in an opportunistic way and on a positive way? So that's been the majority of focus in developing and continuing to develop our teacher skill set around this area. And that's really how it's living right now within our schools as a major tenet of our reopening plan. And then finally, the last of the 5 major markers is around service delivery. How do we provide our special education services to our students? I really do want to give a huge shout out to our staff. First, to our teachers. Our teachers, no matter if they are in elementary, middle, or high school, they are balancing 2 worlds. They are providing services to students in person, and they're also providing specialized instruction to students who are participating remotely. So we don't have a special education school for distance learners. They're really doing both, and they're doing so, I have to say, quite successfully and beautifully. The other kind of new tool and requirement that we have in special ed is something called a learning model implementation plan. It's a new construct that's come about because of the pandemic. And the state has said this: if you have a student who has an IEP, IEPs are written to be implemented while students are receiving instruction within their building. If you have a student who is participating in distance learning but receives special education services, or you have a student whose IEP is going to be implemented because of the pandemic differently from how it's written, you must collaboratively design this new document template with parents to say, this is what your special education instruction is going to look like. Again, if it's different from an IEP. So that's been certainly different for us. It's opened collaborative conversations with families, certainly to a different level. But I just want to recognize that that was an additional add onto what special education teachers and service providers were already doing pre-pandemic.
So quick question on that.
Please.
'Cause that's interesting, and I know as this was evolving, we talked a lot about how they'd be able to take it on, but have those conversations led back, or will they lead back to productive conversations in the PPT around how to then improve the IEP or shift the IEP, or do you see them as two kind of separate things?
No, I see them as absolutely connected. And again, when we write the IEPs, we always look at what are the concerns based upon a student's skill. We write goals and objectives to that end, and then develop, okay, what is the specially designed instruction going to look like in order to get us there? These back and forth collaborative conversations help to define and refine some of those plans for kids. Again, with the ultimate goal of an IEP that's written for in-school implementation, if that makes sense.
And I know your staff has been huge advocate of trying to get as many kids back in as they can. And have talked to us both about that.
Absolutely.
And we've had a great deal of success with that, so that's good.
Right. I mean, that was another tenet of our reopening plan, that we look at prioritized return of our students who have the greatest need. And they continue to advocate for that in-person instruction because it matters. So the other big element of service delivery, I know that actually some board members have asked me about it, are planning and placement team meetings, or PPTs. So in the spring, when we were experiencing school closure, PPTs were put on hold for good reason. And then we started to have certain PPTs during the summer months and during the months leading up to reopening. But you can imagine the legislative requirements of having PPTs by certain dates and certain times didn't go away. So we had a backlog of PPTs, and this was all districts, not just Simsbury, that we needed to have. Plus, when we reopened, the PPTs that we would have already had scheduled. So again, I just want to thank, in that theme of grit, grace, and gratitude, our staff, including our secretarial staff, they managed to do that, and we are completely caught up and back on schedule.
Wow.
And we were done by December 1st. It was pretty amazing.
That's really impressive.
Major heavy lift. So, before I transition to some additional programmatic updates, I just wanted to stop and pause to see if board members had any questions about these big 5 areas of focus.
Sue, do you know the percentage of the kids in special ed who are in person? How many of them are back in the building?
About 80%.
80%? Mm-hmm. That's what I thought you had said, I'm sorry.
Right. And we're really excited about that. And the other piece of that is, if they're specifically at the high school where they still continue to live in a hybrid model, we have our students come back for as much in-person instruction as possible, so that we can meet the service delivery and the instruction that's denoted in the IEP.
So they're not limited to the AB schedule?
Not necessarily, no.
This might be a question also for Neil, but like, do we also look at like numbers for, like, not just who's in distance learning and who's not, but who is attendance records at the schools now? Like, are we seeing less people attend, like, however they're going to attend, are they attending less or more, or it's the same? And then how does that look for special ed as well?
Yeah, so, our attendance, I mean, it's interesting because you also have quarantines and other things that have to do with, so we have all new ways to code attendance in addition, so like if you are forced to be remote, you can now be remote absent or remote present based on whether or not you log in for the day. So there's entirely new ways that we're tracking attendance. Attendance was not noticeably off during the first several months of school. We were required by the state to report on a weekly basis any students who were in remote learning who were disengaged for the week, meaning that they didn't log in at all. And obviously, in some of our urban districts, there was a very high percentage of disengaged students that they had gone remote and really they weren't attached logging into their classes. We had several weeks where we were literally 0 disengaged kids. So I've been tracking it that way because that was a state report we needed to do. I do know that we have more students attending remotely here and there at the high school than people had seen. That's really been a December and January, a little more joining remotely than coming in person. And that's a trend that Mr. Petrina and the other administrators have been talking about with their faculty, and they're a little concerned about. So.
And it's a trend that's consistent in high schools.
Yes, yeah.
So a lot of conversation with superintendents about that. Are people seeing the data the same way? And that engagement data is really interesting data to look at the state level. It's on the state website. It really varies, across the district breakouts, and it's worth a look. I mean, it's easy to find. It's a pretty good data spread.
It's out on Ed's site.
Yep.
Interesting. I was just interested if people were not showing special education or regular education or.
Yeah, it's something, again, that we are certainly keeping our eyes on, our ears open, and continuously doing the reach out as we would before if students weren't attending program. But we are experiencing some very good engagement despite it, so. So just to transition, SEPTO is our special education parent-teacher organization. Continued strength there. We have parent members, staff members, and we try to do monthly programs. We haven't done as many monthly programs this year, but our next one is coming up just next week on January 20th. So I was slated to kind of give a state of the state in special education with the audience of parents in mind, probably some of the many themes that I just shared with you here. But also Neil is coming to do a focus group with parents relative to the Director of Special Services position and what characteristics and qualities parents are looking for. So we utilized our regularly scheduled meeting for that purpose. So that is exciting. We also have programs that we will enact with the Department of Developmental Services and Transition. So we'll continue that parent collaboration through that group, and just want to thank my SEPTO officers for their continued dedication. Again, by statute, what I'm obligated to share with you is how did Simsbury do relative to the Bureau of Special Ed's annual performance report. So this report evaluates the state's effort to implement the requirements and the purposes around the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, also called IDEA. So it's a 6-year plan. There are a host of indicators. There's 16 different indicators that make up this improvement plan. And the school district receives kind of scores and marks on each one. We met all requirements. What they did want us to do, however, is provide some additional information, because comparative to our overall student population, we had a slightly higher disproportionate representation of Black and brown males under one of the disability categories called other health impairment. By and large in Simsbury, other health impairment will be your attention deficit with or without hyperactivity, could be actually a whole host of things, but by and large it's attention deficit, and it could also be anxiety. So we are actually utilizing that data and bringing that to Equity Council. So Sharon was there to participate last month, and we delved into that process a little bit more around special education identification and mandation. And our Equity Council is really looking at that data very closely, specifically what's going on with our male students of color and overall identification. How do we get to the root causes of why there's some disproportionality, and to, again, offer some next steps and suggestions, which we will bring back here to the board. So I just wanted you to be aware of, this is how we utilize this data in a very real way to get at our issues of equity right here in Simsbury. So certainly more to come there, but wanted to highlight that for the board this evening. And now on to the budget. So what I want to do in this kind of second half is to share with you some program cost, share with you some grants, and how excess costs in the IDA grant play into our overall support of students with disabilities. Look at some staffing. Also show you some preschool, our youngest students who are identified, and just to provide some additional budget information for you. So special education as a program, and I always say special education is around services, but we'll call it a program as far as this cost slide goes. It represents just over 24% of all of our Board of Ed expenditures. And these are the major four areas. Certainly around salaries and benefits for students for whom we place out of district to receive their special education services, transportation, whether that be specialized transportation of students that are here within district that may require different ways to get to and from school and program, and purchase services and supplies. So from that those can be services that we contract out, evaluators that have a level of expertise that might help us to inform programming. We have some other supports that we provide students that is in that category, but that is the overall programmatic cost. One source of our funding, first, we always budget net of the grant and the excess costs that I'm going to talk to you about in just a moment. But one of our sources of funding in special ed is through the Individuals with Disabilities Education Grant. It's a 2-year grant. So currently we are in the grant years of 19 through 21. We allocate funds based upon many different factors. But again, this is all around states who have to serve students with disabilities ages 3 through 22. So I have an asterisk there because for years I've been saying 3 through 21. Recently, there's been a ruling that Connecticut has misinterpreted the age of majority relative to IDEA. It's an interesting phenomenon nationally because there are many states who interpret it at the end that students would age out at the end of the year in which their 21st birthday occurs. In other states, it's interpreted that students age out on their 22nd birthday. So if that's August 15th that you turn 22, that's when it happens. In a nutshell, without going into too much detail, there was a recent ruling that we need in Connecticut to use the marker of the student's 22nd birthday. There was some appeals that have been denied, so this is how districts in Connecticut are moving forward. There were some budget implications. We had some students who we had budgetarily projected to age out that are still with us and will continue with us through their 22nd birthday. So we've had to make some financial adjustments accordingly. But I wanted the board to be aware of that because that is a major shift overall in the state. So some of the funds that we receive federally they stay within the state, and the state can use those for a portion of whatever activities as they deem appropriate, and then they pass certain funds to districts. So this is our total grant funding right now. It's just over $1 million, and the majority of our funds are used to supplant some of our staffing here in district. We also have our excess cost grant. So excess costs are determined. What we do is we take our per pupil expenditure and we multiply that by 4.5 times. That creates what's called a threshold. And any monies that we spend over that threshold, which you see on the screen, is about $81,000, we can apply to excess cost grant funding. Typically, we receive about 70 to 75% of those costs that go over that threshold. Certainly, there's a lot of discussion. Lydia's brought it up before around a request for excess costs to be funded at 100% and not 70 to 75. But our estimated reimbursement is about $1.6 million. And again, just as a reminder, that we budget our for operating net of these excess costs. But
So
those
that's
are
a number too that over the decade has slipped from high 70s of reimbursement, sometimes even 80, down to 70, 75%. So it's a major player in the budget, right? People will remember a few years ago, we did a presentation on the volatility of the outplacements, right? It's an unpredictable thing at times that can happen. New move-in, special programming, Sue said the legislative change. Those can be large tuitions that you are on the operating cost front for the minimum of 81,000 per student. So something to look at now in an area we'll talk more about honestly in the upcoming budget season, as there may be some deficit there to talk about.
Lydia.
Yeah, and actually, I'm glad that you mentioned that because part of the 2021 legislative priorities is supporting our schools, but we're going to continue to advocate with the legislature about removing the cap on the special ed excess cost grant. And I've spoken many times about that you know, this is the one area that all districts actually around the country are concerned about, so that's going to be something that we're going to take,
You have that, right, and you have the educational cost share grant that come up every year.
You
look at these formulas that are a little bit broken. We haven't made significant movement on it, but they stay on the agendas.
Right.
So all of this great work does require specialized staff to assist in its implementation. And this is a history that I continue to update for you that denotes our certified staff, our paraeducators, again, over a 5-year run, and other non-certified staff support. So in a nutshell, over the 5 years, we've increased 0.14 FTE in these categories. We've had some ups and downs for all different reasons, but I do want to highlight some of the additions as well as some of the reductions to give you a better of an idea and a history of what you've supported as a board. So going back to the 2016-2017 school year, we had, and this trend continues that I'll show you in a slide in a moment, preschool, we have more preschool kids. We continue to have more preschool kids identified with special needs than ever before. So we added teacher, we added para support there. We also added specific students or teachers at the high school for an intense population that we knew was coming through elementary and middle school and continues with us. We did take some reductions. Again, we want to make sure that we apply our resources appropriately with our staff. So every single year, we look at ebbs and flows. We look at students who move into our district, students move out, and what those needs are. So we did take some reductions in the 17-18 year, and then you can see over the course of the past couple of years, this emphasis has really been on adding social work. And I've shared with you the importance of that work for our kids, kind of that boots on the ground. And you all supported last year a half-time special education teacher at Latimer Lane due to their increased enrollment and caseload. So just want to thank you for that additional support and that detail that goes behind the staffing slide. And then as I kind of conclude here in just a bit, I always like to remind the board of our birth to three. So our birth to three students that before they become public education eligible through special education participate with various providers to receive services. And providers, they run the gamut. Certainly there's some inconsistencies with providers in their communication, but we've developed phenomenal relationships. Want to thank Leah Coe, our preschool supervisor, and her staff, because they have really developed these relationships, and these agencies have built trust to say, hey, this is what it's like. Parents, you should be reaching out to your districts to share that they will be coming to you soon. But technically, it's only 6 months out that we receive a number, like, hey, in the next 6 months, you're going to have this many more students who are eligible as 3-year-olds to receive special education services in your preschool. And then 3 months out, we receive the nuances of a student's profile, their complexity, their intensity. So a number 2 could, you have 2 students, can mean various things based upon an individual circumstance. So that's why those relationships are important, that we get that information early and often.
Sue, what is the reason for them not sharing that with you sooner?
They're not necessarily required to do so. For a lot of this too, parents are at the very beginning of their journeys in understanding their little bugs. I mean, they're babies, they're toddlers. And so I think that there's some hesitancy there, and not sure how that's going to kind of live out, or how preconceived notions that might be made. This is their first time with this, and with very complex children that they're concerned about. So I think that that's part of it. And that's why those relationships continue to be important to foster, so we can build that trust early on.
Great, thank you.
Yeah. One of these final slides, this is just an enrollment history. So again, if you think about preschool and special ed, it's almost like a rolling admissions, right? They come to us on their actual 3rd birthday. So where we start in September in our numbers, we always creep up. And this graphic just shows you that differential from September to June in where we're predicted to be. So, in conclusion, I was preparing for tonight, and usually, in years past, I've brought students to talk about how they've been impacted, staff, I'll highlight a specific program. And just because of COVID and space, we weren't able to do that tonight. And I'm making my tea, because I knew I was going to be talking a lot tonight, and again, I apologize. But I was making my tea, and it was a positive energy tea. And this specific brand has a little fortune on the back. And I looked at the fortune as I was preparing my tea, and it said, use your head to live with your heart. And I went, okay. That really sums up special education, and how every single day through our mission, I can say unequivocally that our staff, in partnership with our parents and our families, do just that. We use our heads to to live our hearts. So, certainly wanted to just extend the invitation to you if you had any additional questions, and open the floor up to you.
Very nice rap, Miss Lynn.
Yeah, very nice.
Listen, that was,
Very nice.
that was some kind of intervention there. That was some kind of intervention.
That was great.
Anybody have anything they want to ask? Go ahead.
How many, was there an attendance, or is there an amount of children serviced through special education? Was there a slide and I missed that?
There is not, but I can share with you what that number is,
Yeah.
and you'll be receiving more backup materials on that. We're at 604 students, and
K-12 or
that's
pre-K?
pre-K. Pre-K through 22. I also, just as a reminder, we also have to service students in our non-public schools who may be in places like St. Mary's or the Master's School. Not through IEPs, because they're not eligible for IEPs. It's a non-public setting, but there's an element of the grant where we provide services there. We also are responsible for supporting, in a fiduciary way, services that are delivered to students that are Simsbury residents who attend magnet schools or other schools of school choice. So that 604 is encompassing those numbers, Jen.
And then I had another question.
Sure.
Well, about questions. The staff that you have here on the 2021, you have 165. Those are staff that are just associated with special education?
Those are staff associated with special education.
And are those, in this particular year because of COVID, actually doing special education, or are some of those are now teachers at like a distance learning elementary?
Oh, no, so that's a great question. The special education staff, unlike some of our other interventionists through the Simsbury Reading Intervention Program, for example, who went back to classrooms, all of our special education staff are still being utilized for that purpose. So again, at the elementary school, we have our special education teachers are servicing kids in front of them, as well as kids in the distance learning kind of arena. Okay, those are teachers, those are physical therapists, occupational therapists, speech therapists, school psychologists, behavior interventionists. Those are all within that staffing number.
That's crazy. I was just thinking that the reason why I was going down that path was just how many of these kids, so we really feel like we're doing an equally good job, or as best we can, even in this COVID world, because those kids are still being able to be serviced by these teachers. There's not going to be kids that maybe in the reading program, for example, is
Right.
what I'm really getting at. That
Yeah,
I think,
yeah.
like, are those kids going to maybe be further behind, and maybe we're going to need more staff next year because where that number might need to go up because we've lost a year in some ways or
So
no,
this-
we're not
this-
losing any years.
This
because
model,
somebody's-
this model retained, and that's kind of what I was framing at the initial conversation. I don't know yet if it's more staff.
Yeah.
We built really good models with the support of the board over time, so that's why I think it's important this year in the budget, when Neil talked, to bring back out some of those concepts and make sure we fully restaff any vacancies in the Simsbury Intervention Program. There are math coach vacancies because a couple left for administrative positions. We'd like to refill those positions. It's not necessarily going up in dollars, but it's not taking it away, because those structures that we've talked about for the past 5 to 7 years are what's going to help us transition back in and return kids to where they are. So I think that's the rub this year that's a little bit different, you know?
I think when we talk about staffing, it would be helpful maybe for us to know where we've redirected people,
Yeah.
what programs we took them from,
Yep.
so we can understand where the needs
Absolutely.
might be next year.
Yeah. Yeah.
If we made it, you said we met the standard for the state, we met the requirement for the state. How many towns were able to do that this year?
Oh, you know what? I would have to look at that. and.
But that's
to
not
see-
standard that every town meets everything.
No, it is not.
I mean, that's very special, and we should
It is
be
not.
proud of it.
And we continue to do that very consistently. It's something that we're very proud of on those indicators, but no, not every district, but I don't have that number for you offhand.
I don't need it, I just wanted to get the feeling for that.
Anyone else? Just thank you for a job well done. You've led this department beautifully, and the hard work of everyone on that staff. It's really a credit to you that the kids are being taken care of in such a great way.
I have an incredible team. Thank you.
Great.
All right.
Thank you, Sue.
Okay, so with that, we are back to public audience number 2, and we still don't have any of that. So, future business. Our next meeting will be Tuesday, January 26th. The location is listed as Latimer Lane School, so we hope to see you all there. And if that were to change for some reason, we will be in touch, would let everybody know. But plan to meet at Latimer Lane School at 6:30 on Tuesday, the 26th. And thank you all. I'll take a motion to adjourn.
I make a motion to adjourn?
Second?
Second?
All in favor? There we go. Thank you all.
Back in action.
Here you go.